headlines. Ukraine's President Zelensky is accusing Russia of bombing residential districts in the city of Kharkiv. He calls it a war crime. In a late-night video address, Mr. Zelensky said there were eyewitness accounts of civilians being deliberately targeted during a sustained attack on the country's second biggest city. He called for the whole of Ukraine to become a no-fly zone for Russian aircraft. Reports suggest that a convoy of Russian military vehicles seen advancing on Kyiv is substantially bigger than earlier reports. Satellite imagery company Maxar Technology, which provided these images, says the convoy actually stretches much longer than the 27 kilometres originally thought. And 500,000 people have left Ukraine since the invasion began, with some cities witnessing a frantic scramble to escape. Many are travelling to Poland, which borders the west of the country.
Russian troops are advancing toward the Ukrainian capital. An armored convoy reportedly stretching more than 60 kilometers is now closing in. These satellite images capture the long line of armored vehicles, tanks, and artillery and support vehicles. Maxar Technologies gave media an update Sunday, saying the convoy is now just north of Kyiv. A senior U.S. Defense Department official says Russia looks to encircle the capital in the coming days. He says nearly 75% of the Russian troops that were massed along the border are now in Ukraine. Russia continues to bombard cities with missiles. The official says heavy fighting continues in and around the second largest city of Kharkiv. Russian troops are also attempting to advance on Mariupol in the east. But the Ukraine military is putting up a strong resistance. Neither city has been taken. And the official says Ukraine's air defense still represents a significant roadblock to Russia's military advance. Some media reports have quoted U.S. government sources as saying that Belarus is preparing to send troops across its border into Ukraine to support Russia. The senior defense official denied it. On Tuesday, Reuters cited an Interfax news agency report saying Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu stated his country will continue its military operation until it achieves its goals. He reportedly claimed Moscow's main goal was protecting itself from threats created by the West. A Ukrainian freelance journalist who fled to the western part of the country has spoken to NHK World about the dire situation.
Civilian homes were destroyed and civilian population was killed. So Russia is committing war crimes.
Olga Tokaryuk is based in Kyiv, but she's evacuated with her husband and their 6-year-old daughter. The invasion hasn't stopped her from working. She says Moscow's campaign of disinformation has played a big role in recent events, and Ukrainian journalists are working to tell the truth.
Many people in Russia at least remain passive in front of what is happening now because they were told for years and years that Ukrainians are Nazis, that they don't deserve to exist, and they chose to believe this propaganda.
Tokaryuk says the public are coming under Russian fire, and she's urging the international community to do all it can to stop the invasion.
From what I know, is the most dire in Kharkiv, where food shortages are reported, where civilians have been deliberately targeted and killed, where also people have not enough access to medical, to drugs, to medicines.
Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he received certain signals from Russia in the first round of bilateral talks, but the two sides remain far apart. It's unclear whether the next round of negotiations will lead to a ceasefire as global criticism over the invasion rises. A growing number of countries are reversing their previous policies and expressing support for Ukraine. On Monday, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan condemned Russia at a news conference.
We see Russia's attack on Ukraine as unacceptable and appreciate the fight of the Ukrainian people and administration.
The Turkish president said based on an international treaty, his country will restrict the passage of warships through its Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits, separating the Black Sea from the Mediterranean. Turkey is a NATO member, but has strong economic and military ties with Russia. The move to shut the waterways came in response to a request from the Ukrainian government. Finland is a neighbor of Russia. It said on Monday it'll provide Ukraine with 2,500 rifles and 1,500 anti-tank weapons. Finland had previously refrained from providing weapons to countries in conflict. Sweden had a similar policy. It said on Sunday it's sending 5,000 anti-vehicle weapons, helmets, and protective clothing to Ukraine. Switzerland maintains neutrality, but its government decided to sanction Russian President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov by freezing their private assets. In Japan, support for Ukraine continues to spread. The lower house of the Diet on Tuesday adopted a resolution condemning Russia's aggression. It calls on Russia to immediately stop its attacks and withdraw its troops. It also urges the Japanese government to do its best to ensure the safety of Japanese nationals in Ukraine and to take firm action against Russia, including sanctions, together with the international community. Japan's Prime Minister Kishida Fumio spoke with French President Emmanuel Macron by phone on Tuesday evening. The two leaders harshly criticized Russia and confirmed the need to take strong sanctions.
We recognize that not only Europe, but also the entire international community, including Asia, must take seriously the fact that changing the status quo by force should not be allowed.
The Prime Minister said he'll continue to conduct summit diplomacy and work closely with the international community. U.S. President Joe Biden has sent a group of former top officials to Taiwan. It's the second time he's done so since April 2021, and it comes with ties between Washington and Beijing at a low point. The unofficial delegation touched down in Taipei on Tuesday. There are 5 people in total, all from the field of defense. They include former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Michael Mullen, and former Undersecretary of Defense, Michelle Flournoy.
The second visit of a senior and important delegation to Taiwan within only 1 year, especially when the situation in Ukraine is ongoing. This kind of rock-solid and specific action shows the commitment of the United States towards Taiwan. It shows Taiwan's situation is taken seriously in the United States across party lines.
Taiwan's presidential office says the delegates are scheduled to meet President Tsai Ing-wen on Wednesday to discuss regional issues. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbing says his country urges the U.S. to stop all forms of official exchange with Taiwan. Security experts say the crisis in Ukraine could influence how China chooses to treat Taiwan, including potential use of force. President Biden plans to host a summit with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations later this month. The event is intended to demonstrate America's commitment to the Indo-Pacific region at a time when China is becoming increasingly assertive. The White House says the U.S.-ASEAN summit will be held in Washington on March 28th and 29th. Biden made the case for stronger ties with Southeast Asian countries last October during the first U.S.-ASEAN summit in 4 years. In February, his administration released its Indo-Pacific strategy. It calls for deeper U.S. cooperation with Japan, ASEAN, and others in order to counter China in terms of national and economic security. White House official Kurt Campbell said in a speech on Monday that the Biden administration remains committed to the Indo-Pacific despite the need to respond to the Ukraine crisis. Japan has been virtually off limits to everyone but nationals and existing long-term residents during the global pandemic. But starting Tuesday, border authorities opened the door a little wider. They've raised the cap on the number of entrants and eased rules for quarantine. 5,000 people can now enter per day, including returning Japanese nationals and residents. That's up from 3,500. Tourists are still banned, but the decision offers hope to foreigners waiting to get in the country for study, research, and business, but just a glimmer. They number about 400,000.
We really welcome the announcement. We're really happy with it. But we don't want to get too excited. We want to stay calm and collected.
Isabel, who didn't want to reveal her family name, is among 150,000 students waiting their turn. She enrolled in a Japanese university last October, but has been forced to take online classes in the UK ever since. Even just getting to Japan means jumping through several hoops, and Isabel knows she's not alone.
They've waited months or years, and now they can't get in because people have to fight for a visa appointment, and people have to fight for flights, as well as the tense situation with Russian airspace.
Those who do arrive must isolate for just 3 days, subject to a negative test. Some people who've been triple jabbed can even bypass quarantine altogether. The Japanese government plans to gradually bring society back to a state of pre-pandemic normality. But officials say they're also prepared to tighten restrictions if need be. Authorities in Tokyo reported nearly 12,000 new coronavirus cases on Tuesday. There were 32 deaths, equaling the daily record set in February last year. And experts warn Japan is not in the clear just yet, especially when it comes to providing care.
I think the severe situation within the medical system will continue for the time being.
31 of Japan's 47 prefectures are under so-called quasi-emergency measures aimed at containing infections. The restrictions are set to expire on Sunday, but the government could announce an extension before the week is up. Persistent heavy rain has flooded some of the coastal areas of Queensland and New South Wales in Australia. Our meteorologist Sayaka Mori has the details in World Weather.
Hello there. Relentless heavy rain, which authorities called rain bomb, has been hitting eastern Australia. The heaviest rain has fallen near the border of New South Wales and Queensland. Brisbane had about 800 millimeters of rainfall in 6 days or so. That's much more than the monthly rainfall. It's actually about 5 times the February monthly rainfall. And significant flooding is taking place. Take a look at this video from New South Wales. Thousands of people had to evacuate from northern parts of New South Wales on Tuesday as severe flooding continued in the region. More than 1,000 people who were stranded had to be rescued by Australian Defence Forces via helicopters. At least 40,000 people have been ordered to evacuate as the waters completely submerged homes. A Weather Bureau official said that the amount of rainfall was astronomical, causing floods that some communities haven't seen in decades. Rain has eased in parts of Queensland, but heavy rain is now affecting the coastal areas of New South Wales. A more heavy rain could lead to more flooding for the next couple of days. Sydney could see heavy rainfall at least into Thursday. Brisbane could see drier conditions with temperatures in the 30s for the next couple of days. We have a system over Western Australia. The system could intensify to a cyclone and could make landfall on the coast of Western Australia on Thursday. Rain affected the southern half of Japan. Snow is falling in parts of the north too, and temperatures are going to be as follows on your Wednesday. Tokyo 13 degrees, 4 degrees cooler compared to what we saw on Tuesday, 3 degrees in Sapporo. Heavy rain is hitting the western areas of the United States. Seattle has significant rainfall on Monday. Rainy weather could continue in Seattle on Wednesday, looking pretty sunny and warm across the eastern areas of the U.S. That's it from me. Stay safe.
日付が変わって3月2日水曜日午前0時の NHK ニュースです。ロシア軍によるウクライナへの侵攻が続く中行われた双方の代表団による会談について、ウクライナのゼレンスキー大統領はロシアから確かな合図を受け取ったと一定の評価を示しました。 ただ双方の立場の隔たりは大きく、次回の交渉で停戦につながる進展が見られるかは依然不透明です。ロシア軍によるウクライナへの侵攻は首都キエフや第2の都市ハリコフなどに加え、地元メディアによりますと新たに南部の都市ヘルソンでもロシア軍が包囲しようとするなど各地で攻勢を続けています。こうした中、先月28日に行われたロシアとウクライナの代表団による会談では交渉を継続することで一致しました。会談の内容についてウクライナのゼレンスキー大統領は28日フェイスブックに投稿し、交渉は難航したことを認める一方で、ロシア側からは確かな合図を受け取った。キエフに交渉団が戻ったら分析をした上で2回目の交渉をどのように進めるか決断すると一定の評価を示すとともに、ロシア側の提案を慎重に分析する考えを明らかにしました。一方、ロシア大統領府のペスコフ報道官は1日、ロシアはゼレンスキー氏をウクライナの大統領とみなしているのかと記者団に聞かれたのに対して、そうだ、ウクライナの大統領だと述べました。プーチン大統領は先月25日、ウクライナ軍に対してゼレンスキー政権を見限り権力を奪取するよう促す発言をしていましたが、ゼレンスキー政権との間で交渉を継続する意思を示したものとみられます。ただ、交渉における双方の立場の隔たりは大きく、数日以内に再び行われる見通しの2回目の交渉で停戦につながる進展が見られるかは依然不透明です。ウクライナのゼレンスキー大統領は1日、ヨーロッパ議会で演説し、我々は EU に加盟するためにも戦っている。我々と共にいることを示してほしいと述べて支持を訴えました。ゼレンスキー大統領は先月28日に EU に正式に加盟を申請しました。ヨーロッパ議会では1日、ロシアによるウクライナへの軍事侵攻について討論が行われ、冒頭、ゼレンスキー大統領がオンラインで演説しました。この中でゼレンスキー大統領は、我々は国と自由のために戦っている。EU に加盟するためにも戦っている。EU なしにはウクライナは孤立する。我々は自らの強さを示した。どうか我々と共にいることを示してほしいと述べて、EU 加盟への支持を訴えました。この後登壇した EU のフォンデアライエン委員長は、EU とウクライナの関係はかつてなく深まっている。まだこの先道のりは長い。まずこの戦争を終わらせ、その次のステップについて話をしなければならない。しかし我々ヨーロッパの価値観のため、これほど勇敢に立ち上がった人たちがヨーロッパの一員でないとは誰も思わないだろうと述べ、ウクライナの将来的な加盟を支持する立場を示しました。ドイツのミュンヘン市は1日、ミュンヘンフィルハーモニー管弦楽団で首席指揮者を務めるロシア人で世界的な指揮者のワレリー・ゲルギエフ氏を解任したと発表しました。ロイター通信などによりますと、ミュンヘン市はゲルギエフ氏に対してロシアによるウクライナへの軍事侵攻に対して明確に反対するよう求めたものの返答がなく、解任を決めたということです。ゲルギエフ氏はロシアのプーチン大統領の長年の友人として知られ、先月アメリカ・ニューヨークで行われたウィーンフィルハーモニー管弦楽団の公演で指揮をする予定でしたが、そちらも公演の開始前日に交代が発表されました。東京電力福島第一原子力発電所の事故当時、設備の破壊を防ぐために外に気体を放出するベントという操作をした際に、放射性物質に汚染された1号機と2号機の配管について、東京電力は昨日撤去作業を始めました。配管は切断後、原子力規制委員会とともに調査する予定です。撤去するのは SGTS 配管と呼ばれ、事故時に原子炉建屋内の気体をフィルターを通して外に出す配管で、1号機と2号機の建屋から屋外に設置された排気筒につながっています。東京電力は水素爆発を起こした1号機の建屋全体を覆うための大型カバーの設置に支障をきたすことから、配管のうち屋外に出ている部分から撤去を始めました。撤去する配管は1号機側がおよそ65メートル、2号機側がおよそ70メートルで、11年前の事故当時、原子炉を覆う格納容器が内部の圧力で壊れないよう、 放射性物質を含む気体を放出するベントという操作をした際、内側が汚染されました。配管の放射線量は去年5月に調査した際に1時間あたり最大160ミリシーベルトが観測されたということで、クレーンや裁断装置を操作して切断する計画です。切断した配管は東京電力と原子力規制委員会が調査する予定で、配管の汚染状況などからベント実施による影響などを調べることにしています。撤去作業は今月末までの計画です。新型コロナウイルスの感染状況です。昨日全国で6万5434人の感染が発表されています。このうち東京都内の昨日の感染確認は1週間前の火曜日より370人多い1万1813人でした。また都は感染が確認された32人が死亡したと発表し、1日の発表では去年2月3日と並んで最も多くなりました。全国では合わせて236人の死亡の発表がありました。続いてスポーツです。ロシアによるウクライナへの軍事侵攻を受けて IOC 国際オリンピック委員会がロシアとベラルーシの選手を国際大会に参加させないよう勧告したことについて JOC 日本オリンピック委員会の山下泰裕会長は全面的に支持していると述べて理解を示しました。山下会長は昨日東京都内で報道各社の取材に応じ、 IOC がロシアと同盟関係にあるベラルーシの選手らを国際大会に参加させないよう勧告したことについて全面的に支持している、極めて非常な事態だと思う、より多くの人が傷つかない形で収束するためにできることは何かを考え行動することは極めて大事だと述べ理解を示しました。また IJF 国際柔道連盟が山下会長と親交のあるロシアのプーチン大統領が務める連盟の名誉会長と大使の職務を一時的に停止したことについて、こういう事態になって世界の柔道界が一つになってやっているときにプーチン大統領が名誉会長という座にいるのは好ましくないと述べ、自身が理事を務める国際柔道連盟に対して賛同する意見を伝えたことも明らかにしました。フィギュアスケートの羽生結弦選手が右足首の怪我のため今月下旬からフランスで開かれる世界選手権を欠場することになりました。昨日午後、日本スケート連盟が発表しました。羽生選手は先月行われた北京オリンピックで男子シングル3連覇を目指しましたが、ジャンプに精彩を欠いて4位でした。羽生選手はその後の取材に対して、オリンピックのフリーの演技の前の練習の際に右足首を痛めていたことを明らかにしていました。日本スケート連盟はこの怪我をしている右足首が完治していないとして羽生選手が世界選手権を欠場することを明らかにしました。為替と株の値動きです。外国為替市場の円相場は現在1ドルが114円85銭から88銭となっています。また1ユーロは127円96銭から128円となっています。ニューヨーク株式市場のダウ平均株価、前日の終値より287ドル51セント安い33,605ドル9セントとなっています。ナスダックの株価指数は前日より 33.220 下がって13,718.179 となっています。為替と株の値動きでした。この時間のニュース、羽原がお伝えいたしました。時刻は0時10分になるところです。
The Russian assault on Kharkiv comes less than a day after France said Putin told French President Emmanuel Macron that he would stop strikes against civilian targets. This morning, EU delegates to the United Nations walked out of a speech by Russia's foreign minister at a conference on disarmament to show their support for Ukraine. Let's bring in ABC's Elizabeth Schulze in Washington for more on this. Elizabeth, how is the White House responding to this latest attack on Kharkiv and the allegation that Russia could be guilty of a war crime?
Well, Diane, the White House has made very clear that it supports international multilateral efforts to investigate war crimes, to hold Russia accountable if these crimes are committed in Ukraine. We do know that the International Criminal Court has now started the process of an investigation into war crimes there, with the prosecutors saying that there's reason to believe that it is being committed. And certainly this attack in Kharkiv, the images there speak for themselves. We heard President Zelensky of Ukraine talking about how clearly this is a targeted effort on civilians. The Kremlin is, of course, continuing to deny this. But at this time, we know that the White House says that it wants to move forward with those international efforts. It supports that multilateral approach, Diane.
And a senior administration official tells ABC News that they've learned Russia is planning a more devastating attack, saying they will, quote, crush Ukraine. We've always known that Russia has many more forces than what's currently in the country. So what can you tell us about what they're expecting?
An ominous warning here, but one that's no surprise given what that we've heard from senior officials throughout and leading up to this invasion. The senior official tells us that at one point there was a glimmer of hope that perhaps President Putin would pursue the diplomatic path, but clearly that is not what's happening right now, saying that there is a devastating attack on Ukraine being planned, that indeed the Russians will crush Ukraine. Now, we've been hearing from the Pentagon that all the plans to basically encircle Kyiv are moving forward. We have seen the images of those convoys. And at this time, there is no sign that Russia has any plans to de-escalate. In fact, what we've seen on the ground, what the Pentagon and the State Department are saying is that Russia is turning to more aggressive methods that could result in the loss of more innocent life as it's met that resistance from Ukrainian forces. Diane.
And at least 40 senators are now calling on President Biden to grant temporary protected status to the estimated 29,500 Ukrainians with non-immigrant visas in the U.S. So what would that mean exactly, and how is the White House responding to that?
Right. So what this would do would allow those 29,000 people who are here, perhaps on student visas, travel visas that are about to expire, to stay in the country, not risk deportation, but they would not get permanent residency. We haven't heard from the White House in response to this letter. It was sent mostly in coordination with Senators Dick Durbin and Rob Portman. And they say if there's any time that we should not be sending people back, it's now. They're urging the president to use his executive authority to allow these people to stay. Ultimately, this is just one of the ways that we are seeing that the U.S. says this is what we can do to help. We shouldn't be sending students who are here back to the Ukraine at this time. What the White House is going to do, we're still waiting from their response, Diane.
All right, Elizabeth Schulze for us in D.C. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks.
As the crisis escalates, pressure is mounting on Vladimir Putin. New Western sanctions are isolating Russia even further and devastating the Russian economy. But that's also fueling concerns that Putin could become more erratic. Our foreign correspondent James Longman has the latest from Moscow on Putin and his inner circle.
For Russia, every day of war is a step further into isolation, ever-tightening sanctions changing the lives of ordinary people. With the ruble sinking against the dollar, foreign reserves frozen, and a ban on foreign dealings with Russian businesses, France's finance minister this morning saying the West intends to collapse Russia's economy.
I don't have that much money, but I took a little bit, but it is worrying.
This woman tells me the ATM didn't work for her, but she was able to line up and get cash from the teller.
Who do you think is to blame for this? Do you think it's Vladimir Putin, or do you think it's us, the West?
I support Putin, she says. It's our country. How can I feel otherwise? Another man isn't as lucky as the lady.
You don't have any cash?
And this bank don't have cash.
So you couldn't get cash out of this bank?
No.
Why?
You know.
Protests continue. Now nearly 7,500 people arrested in more than 100 towns and cities across the country. Putin has his support, of course, but this war could turn back 30 years of progress, and not many want that. The Russian Tourist Board says 150,000 Russians are now stranded abroad. Their flights cancelled, their bank cards not accepted.
What we're dealing with here is a government that's lying to its people, the people starting to figure out that they have been lied to. But because of the repression in Russia, They don't have very many outlets to express their discontent or to do anything about it.
On camera Monday, Putin responding to the newly imposed sanctions on Russia, referring to the West as an empire of lies. And this morning, we're also taking a closer look at Putin's state of mind. Photos of him sitting far apart from his other world leaders and even his own top advisors. Few reports that he's remained isolated in recent years and hunkered down during COVID. So what about his inner circle? Sergei Shoigu, Russia's defense minister, is thought to be closest to him. They've been known to go on hunting expeditions together. Sergei Lavrov, Putin's foreign minister, he may be the public face of the regime, but it's thought not as close to the president. Chief spy Alexander Bortnikov, he's head of the FSB, successor to the Soviet spy agency, the KGB, and apparently a trusted advisor. Those closest to Putin share his Cold War mentality, so even if he is listening to advice, it may only be what he wants to hear.
And James Longman joins us live now from Moscow. James, when it comes to Putin's inner circle, who's making what decisions? Do we know what kind of advice he's getting?
We don't know anything, Diane. That's the kind of secret of Vladimir Putin. He keeps everything very, very close. The Russian people have as much of an idea as you or I do. What's become quite clear over the last few years is become increasingly isolated. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, had told apparently his counterparts that when he spoke to Putin, he found a changed man. He was very different to the man that he'd known before the coronavirus pandemic. So there is a sense that this is a man in isolation, not wanting to get close to people he was otherwise close with. But there are people at the top who are, we understand, still kind of close to him. Sergei Shoigu, you heard in that piece there, the defense minister here, is among them. But there is an idea that these are all men from the Cold War era. These are all men with the same mentality as he has. And Sergei Shoigu, we should say, the defense minister, there's a possibility that he is feeding Vladimir Putin a story that Putin wants to hear but has no bearing on what's actually happening on the ground. Because if you think about it, for Sergei Shoigu, he's not going to come to his boss, Vladimir Putin, and say, yeah, the invasion's not going that well. Do you imagine that anyone in this regime is going to go to Vladimir Putin to tell them they're not doing their job properly? Probably not. So the sense is that even if he isn't isolated, the people around him are probably not telling him the truth. And it's more likely, therefore, and we heard it there from Ian, that what you'll see in Syria, in Ukraine, is a response like the one we saw in Syria, which is to get more vicious as the conventional invasion maybe falters. People in this city, here in Moscow, the elites cannot afford for this invasion to go wrong. Vladimir Putin can't afford for it to go wrong, but also those around him can't. So as they realize their political future is invested in this invasion in Ukraine, what you'll see there is it get more vicious, and here the lies continuing. So it's all signs point to a very worrying kind of vicious circle. Diane?
Well, and James, I have to ask, how dangerous is that whole recipe that you just laid out there, given that this is a man that does have access to nuclear weapons?
It doesn't feel good, does it? I mean, look, one has to hope that it's all a threat, and threats never materialize. But look, he has support here. I was out in the street today speaking to people, and there is a sense that every now and again they're shocked and kind of upset by what they hear. Like the invasion of Kiev, the first day of it, I think there was a real sense of, oh my God, this is actually happening. But then Russians rally and they think, actually, we still support our president. Dan?
And James, really quickly, I know that this is already taking a toll on the Russian economy to the point that it's affecting everyday lives there. So how much are the Russian people likely to blame Vladimir Putin for that? Or how likely are they to blame the West for that?
It feels as though at the moment they're still blaming Vladimir Putin. Things here in Russia tend to happen slowly and then very quickly. So any collapse is not going to happen necessarily overnight. Russia still has its friends in China and Turkey who could support it through any prolonged period of sanctions. We've seen, major shipping companies like Maersk say they're no longer going to bring things to Russia in terms of trade. That could mean that food gets cut off. But all these things are much further down the line. In the immediate sense, they're not seeing this just yet affect their lives. Diane?
All right, James Longman, we appreciate it. James, stay safe. Thank you. With war raging in Ukraine, the UN is warning the number of refugees could grow to 4 million. But people across the world are also stepping up to help. Chef Jose Andres of World Central Kitchen is among those volunteers, working with local restaurants, caterers, and food trucks to provide meals for people escaping Ukraine. And Chef Andres joins me live now for more on this ongoing effort. Chef, thank you so much for being here. I know you're super busy right now, but can you tell us a little bit about what it's been like trying to ensure that these people don't go hungry?
Well, so far, let me tell you, I'm impressed by the resolve of the Polish people supported by Ukrainians, where everybody is in the business of provide relief to anybody coming from Ukraine. You can see police, firefighters, churches, different small or bigger NGOs. They're all working together to make sure that nobody will be forgotten. Right now, I am in the town, I am in the pass of Cordova on the Ukrainian side. On this side also you see Ukrainian small or bigger organizations, hands-on, feeding people in the gas station behind me, feeding people in any entry point. It's unbelievable. So far, food in these border towns is not an issue. It's plenty of food. Where we know there is a crisis is already in those cities like Kiev and others that they are surrounded and where food is already obviously starting to run very low. The real tragedy is happening in those places where the war is happening right now.
Well, and that's thanks a lot to efforts like yours for those refugees who have gotten out or close to getting out anyway. What made you want to get involved in such a hands-on way?
Well, listen, World Central Kitchen, we go to emergencies. When we created this organization over 11, 12 years ago, was for hurricanes and tornadoes that now they seem to be happening every time more often. But at the same time, who was going to say that we were going to be also taking care of political situations and now wars? We are here to feed people in their darkest hour. This is a dark hour for Ukrainians. This is a dark hour for everybody around the world. Right now, I'm on my way to Lviv to provide some flour to some nuns that they've been making bread non-stop for the last few days and they're running low. You see, this is what we're trying to do, to make sure that anybody living in Ukraine in any country, that we will have a good organized system where we will feed everybody. We are not alone in this endeavor. Everybody, from the big organizations to the little ones, we're all going to be working together to make sure that nobody will go hungry. Everybody needs to be praying for every Ukrainian right now.
And you must have met so many people struggling with the aftermath of this along the way. Are there any interactions or stories that really stick out to you?
When my team arrived here 3 days ago, I arrived here 48 hours ago, and I was in the pass of Medica. And as we were getting to the border to try to understand the situation and where we will be putting more feeding facilities, as you will see many people live in Ukraine, Ukrainians and many other people from other nationalities. You will see once in a while, very often, groups of 10, 20 young men that they were going towards Ukraine, not leaving Ukraine, with one idea in mind, to go to protect their country, to protect their cities, and to fight next to the Ukrainian president. When you see this happening, that men, young men especially, that they have a great future ahead of us, that all of a sudden they have to forget everything and go to war, unnecessary war, many will agree with me, that breaks your heart. I saw one American that I was too slow to even ask him for his name, but I know he was American and he decided to join because he said the people of Ukraine deserves that everybody fight for them. That was amazing. Made me cry and obviously made me think everybody seems to be with Ukraine. And this, unfortunately, we wish we were not in this situation to be sending young men to war like we're doing right now.
And the UN now says that this refugee crisis could amount to 4 million people in the coming days. What do you think hearing that number?
Well, I've been already in 8 border points. I've been already visiting many of them. We are feeding in many of them. And you see the continuous flow of people. not only through Poland, but we see it from other countries. And I will say that 4 million is the right number. It's so the same for political reasons in Venezuela. You see the millions that are living in Venezuela. This is a war. 4 million could be even more. We're going to be reaching 1 million anytime soon. And if the attack on Kiev is going to end happening in a massive way, this is going to be one in 100 years. I mean, in the last 70, 80 years, the biggest one in Europe. We need to be ready. I was here visiting with members of the World Food Program, where they are trying really to do a very massive response in the day or in the weeks ahead. So we have a plan between the big organizations like World Food Program and more smaller organizations like ours, and then local Ukrainian and Polish organizations. We're going to be as ready as we can to make sure that we can bring relief. Water, obviously, food, obviously, but the many other things that the men and women are going to be needing during this crisis.
All right, Chef Jose Andres, we thank you for your time today and appreciate the work you're doing. Good luck to you and stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Hundreds of thousands fleeing the war. You're looking live now at the train station. This is in Lviv. The border's already overwhelmed by the humanitarian crisis.
And what we were seeing overnight, videos coming out of explosions. This is in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. This shows a strike at a building there, George, as Russia appears to be escalating their attacks.
Yes, and now Russia has been accused of war crimes for targeting civilians as a massive military convoy heads towards the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. The Ukrainian military and militias made up of citizen soldiers have put up stiff resistance to Putin's forces. But now the Russians are bringing more force to the fight. Our team is on the scene in Ukraine and the Kremlin. Senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell starts us off in Kyiv. Good morning, Ian.
Yeah, good morning, George. We're inside one of the many civilian defence bases that have been set up in the city. There are hundreds of troops on this site. I say troops, but 1 week ago they were ordinary citizens with ordinary lives. We've been talking to one stay-at-home mum, a lawmaker, a security guard and his father, who've all come here to fight. And we're seeing the supplies that they're getting. I don't know if you make it out, but there are masses of crates of ammunition there. We're seeing new automatic weapons. And I think there's a real sense here that people know that this battle is closing in after one of the bloodiest 24 hours for civilians and soldiers since this conflict began. This morning, Russia escalating its attacks, striking civilian targets in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, an administrative building targeted with a massive strike. Multiple social media videos from the scene showing the attack by Kharkiv's Freedom Square. The mayor of the city saying Russians have switched tactics to aerial bombardment after their ground offensive failed. On Monday, Russian shells pummeled a residential neighborhood also in Kharkiv. The mayor saying this morning that 11 have been killed, dozens injured in the ongoing bombardments. Human Rights Watch pointing to this video online, accusing the Russians of using cluster bombs on the city. If verified, an attack on civilian areas would be a war crime. Zelensky calling the Russian bombardments of civilian areas in Kharkiv clearly a war crime. And the International Criminal Court opening an investigation saying reasonable bases to believe that both alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity have been committed in Ukraine. But Ukraine's defense forces striking back. The Ukrainian military posting this video to Twitter, which they say shows their drones hitting Russian vehicles trying to advance on Kyiv. And inside the city, thousands looking to flee before the fighting reaches their homes, but others, like Volodymyr Tkachuk, a former soldier, ready to pick up arms and defend the capital.
Javelins that
Javelins,
they
yeah,
got.
very good. For you, tactically, javelins are helpful.
Тобто тактично джавелини корисні.
These latest satellite photos showing a Russian convoy stretching up to 40 miles long, advancing on Kyiv.
They continue to want to move on Kyiv, to capture Kyiv, to take Kyiv.
And as the battle rages, Ukrainian and Russian delegations meeting for 6 hours on the Belarusian border, unsuccessfully attempting to reach a ceasefire deal, but at least agreeing to meet again in the coming days. But Ukrainian President Zelensky accusing the Russians of negotiating in bad faith, saying fair negotiations can take place when one side doesn't hit the other with rocket missiles during the negotiations. Well, we've now got this massive Russian convoy heading in this direction. Not just Russian troops, but also Chechens who have a fearsome reputation. And I think we have to remember that this conflict still isn't a week old, and we should expect it to get worse. And if you look at what Putin did in Syria and Chechnya, it's fair to conclude that he has a long and bloody track record of disregarding civilian safety. Everyone here is totally braced.
And as the world certainly watches what's happening there in Ukraine, all eyes also on Vladimir Putin as this crisis escalates. Our foreign correspondent James Longman has the latest from Moscow on Putin and his inner circle. James, hello.
Yeah, TJ, announcements on new financial restrictions or penalties come almost daily. One by one, countries and institutions around the world are cutting Russia off. The big question, can any of this stop Vladimir Putin?
For Russia, every day of war is a step further into isolation, ever-tightening sanctions changing the lives of ordinary people. With the ruble sinking against the dollar, foreign reserves frozen, and a ban on foreign dealings with Russian businesses, France's finance minister this morning saying the West intends to collapse Russia's economy.
I don't have that much money, but I took a little bit, but it is worrying.
This woman tells me the ATM didn't work for her, but she was able to line up and get cash from the teller.
Who do you think is to blame for this? Do you think it's Vladimir Putin, or do you think it's us, the West?
I support Putin, she says. It's our country. How can I feel otherwise? Another man isn't as lucky as the lady.
You don't have any cash?
And this bank don't have cash.
So you couldn't get cash out of this bank?
No have.
Why?
You know.
Protests continue. Now nearly 7,500 people arrested in more than 100 towns and cities across the country. Putin has his support, of course, but this war could turn back 30 years of progress, and not many want that. The Russian Tourist Board says 150,000 Russians are now stranded abroad. Their flights cancelled, their bank cards not accepted.
What we're dealing with here is a government that's lying to its people, the people starting to figure out that they have been lied to. But because of the repression in Russia, they don't have very many outlets to express their discontent or to do anything about it.
On camera Monday, Putin responding to the newly imposed sanctions on Russia, referring to the West as an empire of lies. And this morning, we're also taking a closer look at Putin's state of mind. Photos of him sitting far apart from his other world leaders and even his own top advisors. Few reports that he's remained isolated in recent years and hunkered down during COVID. So what about his inner circle? Sergei Shoigu, Russia's defense minister, is thought to be closest to him. They've been known to go on hunting expeditions together. Sergei Lavrov, Putin's foreign minister, he may be the public face of the regime, but it's thought not as close to the president. Chief spy Alexander Bortnikov, he's head of the FSB, successor to the Soviet spy agency, the KGB, and apparently a trusted advisor. Those closest to Putin share his Cold War mentality, so even if he is listening to advice, it may only be what he wants to hear.
The dangerous truth of this war is that it's not just an existential crisis for Ukraine, but for Vladimir Putin himself. The route he has chosen, this invasion, means failure is not an option. And so the consequences for this country are dire too. George?
So clear. Okay, James, thanks very much. Our military analyst, retired Marine Colonel Stephen Ganyard. And Stephen, you heard Ian say the battle is closing in. Putin is ordering in Chechens. He's ramping up the air attacks. This battle is clearly reaching a new phase.
Yeah, George, things are changing. The Russians are not caring anymore about civilian casualties. They have to do what they think they need to do, and that's going to include leveling civilian areas. So a big change from yesterday, where things where the Russians were at least saying we're not going to target civilian areas, but now you look at that impact in the center of Kharkiv. That was a very deliberate action.
The West ramping up its pressure as well. You seem to have this battle between financial pressure from the West targeting Putin and his allies and his country, and the military pressure from Putin.
Yeah, and at this point, it's frankly, as James noted, it's Mr. Putin's future that's on the line here. So as the sanctions ramp up, there are two things that come into play here. Time. Both sides need time. The Russians need things to hurry up. They need to hurry up and take Kharkiv and to bring down the fall of the government. The Ukrainians need time. They need time for reinforcement so that all that NATO kit can come in and reinforce them. And they need time for the sanctions to work. So both sides need time, but in different ways.
Some talks on the Belarus border yesterday between Ukrainians and the Russians. Is that all a sideshow?
There was this hopeful part of that, George. It went on for 6 hours, so that was hopeful. At least they had something to talk about. On the other hand, it sure seems like Mr. Putin was just doing that so that he could rearm and re-equip. At this point, I just don't see a path to Russian victory, and Mr. Putin's future being on the line. The Ukrainian people surely have signaled that they will fight for years, and that's just something that neither Russia nor Putin can afford.
But can they fight for years, Steve?
I think it's going to be the rifle in the closet. The sentiment, the morale, the conviction of the Ukrainian people will carry them, and it may be years, and it may be horribly bloody, but at some point, Russia will have to go home.
Steve Gannard, thanks very much.
Washington now, and President Biden set to deliver his first State of the Union address tonight in the middle of an international crisis. Our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, has a preview for us. Good morning, Cecilia.
Hi, Robin. Good morning to you. Given the president's low poll numbers, this is not the speech his team wanted him to be giving to you tonight. Ukraine is definitely going to be a big part of the message. We're told that you're going to hear President Biden talk about these democratic values in the face of Russian aggression. You're going to hear him talk about leading allies in this united front coming together for these harsh sanctions against Moscow. You're going to hear also what he and his team believe they are trying to do right now to minimize the hit on people's wallets here at home. Robin, we say this all the time. States of the Union speeches are usually a time for the president to tick off their accomplishments for the past year. But right now, President Biden tonight finds himself giving this one, his first one, as a wartime speech, Robin.
But as you know, he also has to find a way to address the economic pain that we're feeling here at home. And he comes in with those historically low approval ratings that you were referring to.
Yeah, you're right. 37%, only 37% of people are happy with the job that he is doing right now. So inflation, how much people are paying for goods, that's going to be a major part of this speech tonight. He's going to walk this fine line, really, of highlighting the progress over the last year, but also he has to acknowledge how frustrated people are given this 40-year high inflation. He's going to ask Congress, we're told, to pass parts of what is in his now stalled Build Back Better plan. We're talking about things like paid family leave. But, Robin, you know this, there's zero indication right now that he's got the votes to do this in Congress. COVID is also going to be another big one tonight. He's really going to try to talk about living with this new phase of the virus, and you're going to see that in real time. That chamber, it's expected to be full tonight. It wasn't last year. You're also masks are also optional this year. Today's the first day masks are no longer required at this White House. But Robin, with these midterms just a few months away now, the stakes for President Biden could not be higher tonight.
That's true. All right, Cecilia, thank you as always. And you can see President Biden's State of the Union address tonight right here on ABC beginning at 9 Eastern.
Major League Baseball season is up in the air right now. The deadline for players and team owners to reach a deal has been extended to tonight. Our Will Reeve is at Yankee Stadium with more. Will, they need to get something, or we might be looking at the cancellation of a few games.
We might, TJ, but there is still hope. Opening day is a beacon of spring. It's a movable feast that marks the resumption of America's pastime each year. Right now, people are at the table, but it's a food fight. It's 30 team owners and MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred locking out the players on one side, led by Tony Clark, and then their union. According to ESPN, the sides met for 13 hours until wee hours of the morning today. No labor deal done yet, but they have extended the deadline to get that deal done to 5 p.m. Eastern time today. That deal needs to get done by that deadline in order to prevent canceling opening day and other regular season games. Ultimately, this all boils down to money. Owners making dubious claims that running a baseball team is not often profitable, players asking for a larger cut of revenues. Now, for each day of the season that is canceled, players collectively would lose about $20 million a day. Teams would be losing millions of dollars a day, and it would all come at a major cost to the teams and the stadiums and the economies around it in each of the big league markets, TJ.
And that was key, the economies. Look, a lot of people might roll their eyes and see millionaires fighting with billionaires, but this impacts a lot of people, a lot of lives who are impacted by working at stadiums, working around stadiums, bars, restaurants.
Yeah, that's exactly right, TJ. It's an ecosystem that is so much larger than just the team and the game at a place like Yankee Stadium. Somewhere like this brings in millions of dollars a day to the team, but also to all those restaurants, bars, T-shirt shops, parking garages, all the people who work at concession stands in the stadiums. They rely on this major revenue generator that is one of 162 baseball games for their livelihoods, guys.
All right, well, we do think, and good to make that point, a lot of people could be impacted by just missing a couple of games.
That's true.
The heavyweight champion brothers on the front lines of the battle to save Ukraine from the Russian invasion. It is literally the fight of their lives. Trevor Ault is here with the story. Good morning, Trevor.
Good morning, George. Good morning, everybody. Listen, we've seen the fighting spirit in Ukraine all over the place in the past week, but these brothers, Vitaly and Vladimir Klitschko, they fit right in with that. Both of them are championship boxers, 6'6", 6'7" heavyweights, and one of them, Vitaly, the mayor of Kyiv, has never even been knocked down.
You want to see a heavyweight destroyer? Vitaly Klitschko wants to be your man.
They've become two of the most prominent faces of the Ukrainian defense, Vitaly and Vladimir Klitschko, brothers already known on the world stage as fighters.
Vitaly Klitschko is roughing Lennox Lewis up.
Both of them former heavyweight champion boxers, now leading the rallying cries to protect their home country in Kyiv, where Vitaly is the mayor.
Тільки разом ми вистоїмо. Слава Україні!
Brothers championing the cause of duty and patriotism to their nearly 1.2 million combined followers on Instagram.
We must stay united against this aggression, against Russian aggression.
Vitaly saying he has no other choice but to take up arms against Russia, and Vladimir enlisting in Ukraine's army reserves just before the invasion began. Our Ian Panel spoke to Mayor Vitaly Klitschko exactly 1 week ago as tensions escalated.
I promise if my country needs me, I'm ready to fight.
Their fight against Russia comes decades after their father served as a commander in the Soviet Union.
They're fighting so hard for their freedom because they knew what the system was like growing up in the Soviet Union.
The brothers' childhoods full of military exposure and battle knowledge before they stepped into the ring. Both of them earning PhDs in sports science, nicknamed Dr. Iron Fist and Dr. Steelhammer, as they dominated opponents. Their mother's one request, that they never fight each other.
They're going to stay and fight for their country. They're not afraid.
Vitaly and his wife lived in the U.S. for years during his boxing career, his children even born in L.A. before he moved back to Ukraine, becoming mayor in 2014. Vladimir shares a daughter with American actress Hayden Panettiere.
If anyone's going to survive and if anyone's going to win this, I know it's Vitaly and Vladimir.
Now, the once international superstars are pleading for support from the world as they lead a very different fight back home.
Please, get into action now. Don't wait. Act now.
And several other Ukrainian athletes and at least one other professional boxer have returned home to join this fight. But make no mistake, the Ukrainian resistance is the story of everyday people rising up for their country, men and women of every age who are taking a stand. And the Klitschko brothers say it's going to take help from everybody if they're going to win this fight.
Excellent reporting. All right, Trevor, thank you.
That heart-pounding moment. Listen to this. This is at a Texas rodeo. Here it is on camera. Rider falls off, now is laying unconscious on the ground. His father comes to the rescue, covers his son to protect him from the charging bull. Well, they are speaking out together for the first time. Kaylee Hartung joins us with that. Hey there, Kaylee.
Hey, good morning, TJ. This video has gone viral on social media. People hailing Landis Hooks as Father of the Year. But he doesn't want to be called a hero because he and his son, who've got bull riding in their blood, say this was just another day at the rodeo. A bull's fury, no match for a father's love.
No matter what, I'm going to do what I got to do for him.
At a rodeo in Belton, Texas, right out of the gate, rider Cody Hooks bucked off his bull. This bone-chilling video shared online. The 18-year-old lying motionless, unconscious on the ground. As the bull runs wild and bullfighters try to wrangle him, Cody's father Landis, a cowboy himself, just feet away, jumping into action.
When you saw Cody get bucked off the bull, what ran through your mind?
Nothing. Everything just got quiet and emotion. I just wanted to make sure that sucker didn't come back and get on top of him like he was about to.
Could anyone have stopped you in that moment if they tried?
No, ma'am.
Oh, no.
Not at all. He knows how I am, and nobody could stop me.
Shielding his son's body with his own. The crowd roaring in despair as the defender takes a direct hit from the angry charging bull. The father putting his life on the line, protecting his son.
Cody, have you let yourself think what could have happened if your dad wouldn't have jumped into action?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it all the time. A lot of people don't like to think about, the injuries that happens in bull riding.
especially after they get on.
That's just part of the everyday cowboy life where I come from. Somebody gets down, got to help them.
And if it's your son, you're going to move even faster.
Yes, ma'am. But I am glad I was there, though.
Landis says he didn't suffer any serious injuries. Cody did sustain a concussion and some bumps and bruises. And I don't think it'll surprise you guys when I tell you, after hearing from them, that Cody says when the time is right, probably about 2 months from now, he will not hesitate to get back on a bull. And his dad says he supports him 100%.
We saw that one coming. We did, Kaylee. Wow. I'm glad that they are all, they're both okay.
And I'm glad they're the ones who want to go back.
That's true. Hey!
Welcome back to a powerful play of the day. And the current champ, Christine Welch, I want you to take a look at her. Her first few matches that she competed, that's what she looked like. Now, this is a cancer thriver, and what people didn't realize, she was actually wearing a wig during her first time competing. Well, last night, take a look and listen to her.
After the winnings, I decided that I didn't need to hide behind a wig anymore, and I wanted to normalize what cancer recovery looks like.
Well, you look fabulous. Congratulations on your recovery.
So yes, her first three she competed, she was wearing the wig and decided she wanted to ditch it. She is the 4-day champ now, won about $75,000, and that's great, but it was wonderful to see that moment for her to have last night.
That was, and sometimes we wear the wig to put others at ease.
Wow.
And she showed a lot of strength, a lot of courage, and I'm telling you, people were watching, and it makes such a big, big difference. It really does. Proud of her. It is Fat Tuesday, and the party is back in the Big Easy after being canceled last year due to COVID. Janae Norman is down in New Orleans soaking up all that atmosphere for us. Good morning, Janae.
Good morning, Robin. You can feel the excitement in the air. These are some of the members of the Zulu Walking Warriors here behind me. They're getting ready to kick off the parade in just under an hour to get today's festivities started. This is a 180 from this time last year when dangerously high COVID rates prompted the mayor of New Orleans to cancel the parades, a huge economic blow for the city. Local officials say hotels last weekend were about 70 to 80% full. That is good news here in the Big Easy, but a far cry from 2019's record-breaking year when an estimated 19 million tourists generated about $10 billion. Fast forward 3 years, and New Orleans has some of the toughest COVID restrictions in the South, with indoor mask mandates, proof of vaccination requirements, or negative tests for anyone for indoor restaurants over the age of 5 or indoor spaces. That is all those precautions to prevent a repeat of Mardi Gras 2020, the country's first super spreader event of the pandemic. So smaller crowds, COVID restrictions, shorter parade routes, but all the feathers, beads, sequins you can dream of, Robin. And guys, as the 165-year event is back in most of its glory.
Hey, Janae, is it true that you're on vacation and you volunteered to do this report this morning?
You know, that is funny, Robin. If that's the rumor at work, yes. But no, I was shooting another story. But yeah, let's stick with that.
Oh, I got some bad
being honest right there. How
I thought I had good Have I taught you nothing?
Exactly my thoughts.
Take it easy.
That was great. Now to our GMA cover story on the First Lady of Ukraine. As President Zelensky inspires his country in the fight against Russia, his wife is right by his side to help rally the nation. And Will Reeve is back with a closer look at Olena Zelenska. Hey, Will.
Good morning, George. President Zelensky has said that if he is target number 1 of Vladimir Putin's Russia, his wife and kids are target number 2. But in the face of danger, Olena Zelenska has not fled the country she loves and cares for.
As her husband rallies international support and leads and defends Ukraine from the front lines, Olena Zelenska stands stout, protecting her family. The 44-year-old wife and first lady to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky posting messages of solidarity to her people on social media, writing, "Ukrainians are no mob. We are an army."
Standing by your people and by your country when
you are a personal target. How can that not inspire? How can that not impress?
Zelenska and the future president met at university. She was training to become an architect, he a lawyer. Later, as Zelensky shot to television fame, Olena became a writer for his comedy troupe. The two married in 2003. The mother of two reportedly had reservations about her husband entering the political arena, but she would soon come around and become his biggest supporter. Zelenska quickly making a name for herself through humanitarian causes and her personal sense of style, regularly showcasing Ukrainian designers, appearing in fashion magazines like Vogue Ukraine. Her initiatives span from kids' nutrition to gender equality, part of an ever-growing portfolio for Zelenska. Her last post from an undisclosed location featuring a child born in a bomb shelter, a message of hope for fellow Ukrainians, writing, "Despite the war, there were doctors and caring people on our streets next to her. She will be protected because you are incredible, dear compatriots."
In another post, Zelenska showed the same resolve that so many Ukrainians have in recent days, writing, quote, "My kids are watching me. I will stand by them and with my husband and together with you. I love you guys. I love Ukraine." DJ?
All right, well, thank you so much for that. To our Get the Job series, so many people around the country took a career break during the pandemic, and now if you want to re-enter the workforce after a hiatus, our Rebecca Jarvis has what you need to know.
When mom of two Emma McCulloch decided to re-enter the workforce after 6 years away, she was a little nervous.
I did feel a little bit embarrassed about that career break and how to classify it on my resume.
But Emma was able to show potential employers that her time away, especially caring for her son Christopher, born with cerebral palsy, made her a better employee.
I certainly learned a lot of research skills to identify the therapies and the resources for my children. And in my role as a manager, I'm much more empathetic because of the experiences I had during my career break.
Nice. Women have been leaving the workforce in record numbers since the start of the pandemic and haven't been returning as quickly.
They've suddenly had to juggle not having childcare. And what we actually found is that 1 in 3 women are doing 5+ additional hours of housework each day due to the pandemic.
Many companies are making an effort to bring women back to the workforce, including IBM, General Motors, and JP Morgan, offering career reentry and mentorship programs. And now, LinkedIn is offering a new feature called Career Breaks, giving users the ability to show potential employers why they left the workforce and help navigate their return.
If you can find those companies that are really doubling down, they're likely a better fit.
Good stuff. And to take advantage of this new feature, which is optional, go to the experience section of your LinkedIn profile. Look at career breaks. It'll give you options like caregiving and health and full-time parenting to show the reason why you took the break. And it may feel a little uncomfortable to flag this to potential employers, but hirers actually say they want to know more about your career break. In fact, 51% say they are more likely to contact a candidate that provides context. TJ?
No, be honest. It works, huh, Rebecca?
Yes.
All right, thanks so much. Queen Elizabeth out of isolation after growing concerns about the 95-year-old monarch's health when she tested positive for COVID. Our Maggie Rulli is outside Buckingham Palace. Maggie, she's getting back to work?
Yeah, already, TJ. Just moments ago, the Queen held 2 virtual audiences at Windsor Castle. You know, this is the first time we're seeing the Queen since her bout with COVID last week. The palace tweeting out these photos, seemingly to show that not only is the Queen out of isolation, but yes, she is also already back to work. And guys, even more good news overnight. The Daily Mail is reporting that over the weekend, the Queen had kind of a little mini family reunion with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, including Prince William and Kate, their 3 little kids, and Princess Beatrice and her little one as well. So obviously at 95 years old, there are always growing concerns with the Queen's health. To see her back at work, to see those pictures, Robin, it is just so good and a little bit of good news for all of us this morning.
It really is. Wonderful to see her doing well, Maggie. Thank you. Thank you.
Queen Elizabeth out of isolation after